Hi, and welcome to the NMCA Way, the National Michael Chekhov Association's vlog focusing on Michael Chekhov. And today we are approaching and discussing our second guiding principle that Mr. Chekhov offers us in the audio series on theater and the art of acting. And for those of you who have the Michael Chekhov playbook, you can find information about the 5 guiding principles on page 79. There we are, page 79. So just as a little bit of a recap, we did our session for the first guiding principle. And you can find that on YouTube and also on www.chekhov.net, where we offer a number of other videos on the subject. And it is, I understand Will is working on powering in as we speak. So I'll give you just a little bit of a recap, and I'll just read what it says here for guiding principle number 1. Which is that for guiding principle number 1, we want to practice psychophysical exercises to affect artistic states. So we had a quite in-depth discussion about how the psychophysical exercises operate not only in the physical world, but in the world of imagination and uniting the body, mind, and spirit. And we understand that doing the psychophysical exercises is absolutely integral to enabling the artist to be able to express the wonderful images that come into them. So often when an artist gets an image or an idea and knows exactly what they want to do, the moment they go to do it, it either flows out as they hoped or even better, or it simply doesn't come out at all the way they wanted. And the psychophysical exercises are the antidote to that painful situation where things don't come out the way we meant for them to do. And our second guiding principle is that, as it says here, the use of intangible means of expression to produce tangible results. And to launch us, I'm going to play the ending segment of Mr. Chekhov's introduction. So here we go. So just kind of listen to what he has to say here.
And the other one from the actor. If you go over all the points of our method, you will see that each point actually includes or hides behind it some intangible element. What are actually all our feelings, emotions, our imagination? Everything is intangible, but it is expressed by tangible means. What is important as the guiding principle? To have always in mind that intangible means of expression are always present on the stage at every moment while rehearsing or acting. We must not forget about them. We must even think of them as the most important ones. Then all tangible means, our bodies, our speech, our voices, will become more expressive, more valuable, more speaking to the spectator. But we are inclined nowadays to forget about them and even to eliminate them from our mind and from our professional work, from our performances. This is what I wanted to point out to you. Think of these intangible means of expression, cherish them, foster them, and then it will guide us through all the exercises of the method, through all the rehearsals, through all performances, and will make our profession to something more than it is now. It will raise its standard, perhaps slowly and gradually, but the performances, the theater, the actors and even the spectators.
Welcome to our workout.
Okay. He's concluding that by saying that it will raise the standards of the entire profession. And in raising that, we will raise the standards of humanity. So one of the exciting things that I wanted to point out, I will point out after we welcome Wil Kilroy. So Wil Kilroy.
I don't know if you can see my background, but I thought I would bring this since we recently worked on images, intangible images from the play. So I'm directing the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, which you might think, oh, that's a goofy musical, but the imagery and what we did with the synth analysis really helped the actors all invest into what we're doing. So if you see some crazy stuff in the background, that's what I put back there.
Well, I sure appreciate it. So let's just do a quick introduction of ourselves. I'm Lisa Dalton, and I'm president of the National Michael Chekhov Association, and this is...
I'm Wil Kilroy. I'm vice president of the National Michael Chekhov Association, and I'm right now on the campus of New Mexico State University, where I'm department head for theater arts.
Great. And Wil and I have been working together since 1989, actually 88, the fall of 88. And we co-founded the National Michael Chekhov Association with Michael Chekhov State Executrix Mala Powers. And we taught together with her for 18 years. So our pedagogy of the NMCA comes from a long and deep lineage that has direct connection to Mr. Chekhov. And one of the things that Wil is talking about is one of the points that Michael Chekhov makes about what are intangible elements and how they can have a tangible effect. So if we go back to guiding principle number 1, we're looking at actual movement and imagination, and it's what we might call touchable or tangible. And intangible means you can't really touch it. And in the opening of Mr. Chekhov's discussion, he talks about 3 primary concepts that are very clearly and obviously intangible, that have very tangible impact. And the first one he mentions is the atmosphere. The atmosphere, which is the soul of the story. And it is so exciting to me, Wil, to see, I can just see by looking at your chart what kind of atmospheres are going to be present. So would you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see some of this wildness a little closer here with the camera, but these are just some of the different Post-it boards that we had up for that day. And the atmosphere shifts. I mean, this is an interesting play that sometimes it's really goofy and frenetic, and sometimes it is just very gentle. There's a beautiful song that the parents and the character called Olive sing together, which is all about love between a parent and a child. And you know, so the atmospheres definitely shift. So of course, as all of you that are on here know, I did an atmosphere exercise with the cast that first night that we got together, where we ran through the atmospheres of the entire play. And some of them have never done this work before, so they weren't really sure what they were doing, but they had a lot of fun doing it. And at the end, we circled up and I said, well, what do you think we did? Well, I don't know, but I know when we did this, that related to my character. Well, I know when we did this, that's like the moment in the play. So that was really fun to let them have that realization.
And how would you say you suspect that that's going to produce a tangible result in the performance?
Well, I think they're going to radiate the different atmospheres that are happening during the different times. You know, so they already have it in their mind, in their imagination from the exercise. And obviously now in rehearsals and coachings, they're getting more of that, but I think it's already been planted and we'll keep working on it.
Great. And we know that atmosphere is the most immediately impacting experience that the audience has. And if you think about it, you can imagine that right from the first exposure to the work, which is often in advertising and or a conversation with somebody, the first things that we pick up are the vibe about the project, and that's atmosphere. And so already it has a tangible effect on potential audiences the moment they see any or hear any of the marketing processes. The atmosphere itself begins to hook into their emotional life and draw them right to the play. So creating powerful atmospheres, utilizing these intangible means of expression in your marketing tools will create a tangible result at the box office. So that's one really practical use of it. And as we've seen with Wil, talking right there about the use of the synth analysis process of engaging the entire cast in generating all these wonderful images. These images linger and help affirm the atmospheres that are going to unite the audience and the cast together as the soul, which Mr. Chekhov says. So we remember that atmospheres are the things that linger in the audience's hearts long after the production is done. And that is a soul-warming process when you reflect back on a wonderful show that you saw, or a movie or event you went to. You can feel in yourself a tangible response to an intangible technique there. So that's pretty cool. And I'd like to talk, the next thing he talks about is the psychological gesture. So when we talk about the psychological gesture, we're talking about one grand movement that embodies the singular essence with one breath, one clear move, the singular essence of either the character or perhaps the play, or perhaps the author's perspective or the actor's perspective or the director's perspective. So Wil, is there anything you'd like to share about that?
Well, we have not gotten that far yet, as far as that goes for character, but you know, as far as I'm concerned, that is such an incredible technique, particularly for these students to, you know, attach themselves to. I think it confuses them at first, and that's okay. And as we say, just pretend if you're not getting it right away, that concept. What we did work with already was thinking, feeling, and willing. And I think that is really helpful for these quirky characters in Spelling Bee to figure out what is their predominance. So that's something we have started to work on. And obviously that will come into the PG eventually.
Yes, so the concept of thinking, feeling, and willing are considered the psychology of the human being, of the character, and of every human being. We have these three forces of thinking, feeling, and willing. And Mr. Chekhov does consider those one of the intangible concepts. And it's basically the idea that we have thoughts which we cannot touch, we have feelings which we cannot touch, and we have will impulses or urges which we cannot touch. However, we can find a way to bring them into a tangible process through the psychological gesture, where we activate our will force and we trigger our feeling forces and we clarify our thinking forces and transform them and align them into the particular objective. So this is another aspect. In fact, Chekhov speaks of the entire concept of Stanislavski's analysis as an intangible concept that can produce tangible results. And we have expanded Stanislavski's analysis, and we've interwoven the whole process with Chekhov's experiences of synthesis, creating synth analysis, because analysis cuts things apart, and with synth analysis we reunite everything into one. So I'm also would like to open it up maybe to some of our participants to share observations and comments about how atmospheres and psychological gesture and thinking, feeling, willing might have produced some powerful, tangible results. Anybody like to comment on that?
I would.
Good, Jeff. Thank you.
I just want to say that when I go to see a play anymore, and I think Chekhov spoke to this to some degree, which is, you know, you can tell right away whether a play is going to be successful or not if I can feel the atmosphere almost as soon as the curtain opens or the lights go on. That's so essential to unifying the entirety of the play under in one feeling of the whole umbrella. That if it's lacking that atmosphere, it feels like everyone is kind of doing a different play. And you know, the plays that really sit with me, the ones where I'm thinking about still, you know, 3, 5, 20 years later, are the ones where atmosphere was so prevalent and so there, and so strong that it just landed with me forever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That's exactly it. Anyone else?
Gail here.
Thanks.
I'm working in an acting 2 class. So this is the second semester of acting. Some of them took acting 1 with me and did some Chekhov. Some are new to it because they work with other instructors. And I'm working on Waiting for Lefty because it's a play that has parallels to current situations. It's about taking action. It has historical significance. It's American, a number of things. But they are working on monologues from the play, and we are exploring it in a number of ways. We started off with images and just putting a whole bunch of images on the board that might come from a reading of the play, which we did in class, and then embodying those images. And this is all preparatory to doing some synth analysis work. So today we're working on monologues, and it was obvious that many of these students, it's a 30-second monologue, had a very particular way of imagining the character and doing the monologue. So the work today was, so what happens if you start by making points? I mean, really pointed movement before you speak a line of the monologue. And it was a way to kick them into their thinking force, which some of them had not considered as an option. What happens if you do a movement that opens up your feeling force? What happens if you get into your legs and stamp your feet and make fists and get into your will force? And it was interesting to witness their interpretation of the character in the text begin to change as they became aware and awakened in a particular part of their body. And then to take a monologue and go, well, look at the language. So to make connections between the word choice of the author. The author says baby, not kid. Baby is different. So what does the word baby suggest to you about thinking, feeling, willing as opposed to kid? And then do a scored version of it where it might start thinking, move to willing, and finish with feeling, and to go, oh my God, you hadn't considered the possibility that there might be some love in this character for the person to whom she's speaking. So it was a wonderful opportunity to explore not only the tools, but text, interpretation, choices, their own personal as well as the ones they make with characters. So it was a great exploration. And we're moving toward doing the 9 events on Tuesday, which I've done before. So we'll do a group sculpture of the themes, the idea of the play, and then go into the 9 events, which we have to decide upon as a group, create a ground plan, and then sculpt those 9 events. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. So.
Beautiful. Thank you, Gail. Anyone else want to share anything? And welcome, Jet. So one of the things that, in addition to the psychological gesture for the characters that Chekhov talks about is in the an understanding analysis, Stanislavski's analysis as he refers to it, and for us we would embrace it as synth analysis, this idea that the author has a psychological gesture and the and we include that the director has a psychological gesture, the actor has a psychological gesture, and then the show itself, as if the show itself is its own being, has a gesture for the audience. And finding this, creating this together becomes a very powerful unifying tool, especially when we look at some of the other intangible elements, which include the four brothers of art: the feeling of ease, the feeling of form, the feeling of entirety or wholeness, and the feeling of beauty. And when we're in a production in particular, and I think this also sort of happens in a course, in a semester, especially if you have a senior class that's sort of in the spring getting ready to leave, around about 2/3 of the way into the process, everything sort of collapses because there's all sorts of fear, anxiety, and excitement that's colliding with the tasks that are mounting. And so these intangible means of expression, such as a psychological gesture, can remind, especially if you have a group gesture that embraces your group vision in its fullest expression, to come back in times of crisis, to use this concept of let's do the PG for our class, or let's do the PG for the play, let's do the PG we want for our audience. So that in a class we can ask, how do I want my participants to live their life tomorrow for having taken this class today? And for the play, we can ask, how or what would I like my audience to do tomorrow for having experienced our play today? And creating these psychological gestures can create very tangible impact on the unity, on the feeling of ease among the cast or within the classroom, and can make a very deep impact on your audiences. Wil, is there anything you'd like to share about that?
I think you said it well. Yeah.
There's one thing I want to point out to you that I was very excited about, and I didn't notice this until this winter when I was driving to Florida, listening to these audio cassettes again. And in this 5 guiding principles, in this second guiding principle, and you heard him say this, Mr. Chekhov asks us to think about these intangible tools and to cherish them and to foster them. And if you think about cherish and foster, can you feel he says, use your thinking forces in relation to really thinking about how intangible means really produce tangible results. And then he invites us to cherish, which is really activate your feeling force around it. Isn't that word cherish just beautiful? To cherish the fact that these invisible concepts have a very powerful impact, and to foster. That's an act of will. That is an act of will, to foster, to encourage, to support, to bring forth the intangible elements. And I think that's going to be a very powerful concept as we move forward with these guiding principles. And to keep in mind, he actually comments that every single tool on the chart has behind it an intangible concept. And one of the most powerful sets of intangibles are his 3 primary laws of composition: triplicity, polarity, and transformation. So maybe Will, you could talk a little bit about maybe triplicity. Could you share with us a little about what that means, why it's so powerful?
Well, I think for me too, now that we have studied this law, so to speak, and even asked people where do they see it, which could be from the Holy Trinity to the Three Stooges, it works so well. The repetition works so well for comedy. I mean, I'm working on this comedic musical right now. And to have, even if a gesture repeats 3 times, or, oh, we did this big choreography in the beginning, you're going to see a little bit here, and then in the reprise, we're going to do it again. So it almost seems just inherent in a lot of the work. So it's really fun to work with that and think about it.
Great. And one of the exciting questions to ask is, where is the triplicity? Speaking of what Gail was talking about in the text, is there a repetition of the word of a sound? Is that does a bell ring? And his concept of, if that bell rings exactly the same way, ding-a-ling in the beginning, ding-a-ling somewhere in the middle, ding-a-ling somewhere toward the end, somehow that creates this magical rhythm that repeats. It's a rhythmic repetition, and it requires at least 3 to be a rhythmic repetition. Right? If it's just 2, it may be a coincidence. But a third one actually makes it a rhythm. And that rhythmic repetition, if it stays constant, creates this feeling that that bell rang yesterday and it will ring again tomorrow, and it will go on for eternity in timelessness and infinity. But if it goes ding-a-ling the first time and it goes dong the second time and it goes crash the third time, we have what he calls a crescendoing rhythmic repetition. And that creates a whole different experience inside your audience and inside the actor. So when we look at our intangible expressions, that's an example of how we can utilize this concept of triplicity to really build. And of course, breaking everything into 3s so that we can work on segments, and then those smaller segments of 3 sections of the third, 3 sections of this third, and 3 sections of this third, gives us our structure for our basic synth analysis with our 9 essential events upon which the story turns. So that leads us so perfectly into polarity, which is a fantastic tool that helps us really make sure that those thirds are unique from each other and that there is movement, that things change. So Will, you want to talk a little bit about polarity?
Right. Well, we were just working on polarity because we were doing a synth analysis with the 9 events for Putnam County Spelling Bee. And, you know, at times they would say, oh, no, that was good, and that was good, and that was good, and nothing was changing. So we talked about polarity and how you want to take the audience on a roller coaster ride, not just keep them at an even level, which you're going to lose their attention. And then they said, oh, well, actually, when that happens, that was not good for most of the characters, but that was really good. And we started to create a wonderful graph. So they really got the concept of creating polarity within the story. So we're not just going on even ground. And that's going to make it much more exciting.
Very good. So that, of course, is going to produce transformation. And transformation is something Mr. Chekhov says we all yearn for. And we could say effectively that every time we turn on the TV or go to the theater, movie theater or live theater, or to a concert, or to a bowling alley, we are looking for transformation. We're looking to change the state that we're in to some other thing, hopefully a happier, healthier, more fun state. And that if we can get those valleys and peaks, then we, in the storytelling process, as Will was saying, can take the audience on a greater roller coaster ride. So this is how these 3 T, P, T, or we do make a little TP, and a little teacup, TPT. I don't care how you remember it, but let's remember it, and let's open the field for anyone to share whether you found value in using TPT. Do you remember it? Do you tend to forget it? How has it helped you? Anything like that.
I just want to throw out for that polarity issue in teaching class and having everybody go to the periphery of the room, think about what they want to do for this moment, what do they want to achieve, and then circling up and asking them afterwards what happened. It's really what you're saying, that people have been transformed. We might have done things in triplets because I'll do a yoga pose and say, and for the third time, we're going to do this. So they might not be catching on, but we're doing some of that, but definitely the transformation. And for them to talk about, oh, I came in here and my brain was foggy. I came in here and I didn't have any energy. Oh, now I'm energized. I feel this, I feel different. So they've experienced polarity, you know, just in maybe that 15 or 20 minutes that we've worked. And to me, it goes along with what Michael Chekhov was saying about, you know, not only raising up the theater as an art form itself, but raising up humanity. Because we know a lot of these students are not going to go to professional careers, but for this experience, they will be forever changed. And that's what gives me, you know, just great joy in the work that I do, knowing that they're learning things that are going to bring them to a higher place in their life.
That reminds me, Wil, thank you so much, because when I was a professional coach in Los Angeles, people would ask me, how do I determine what class to go to, acting class to go to? And I encouraged them to park outside the class room and somewhere near where the participants were parking, and watch them as they enter, watch their body language as they enter, and then come back. Don't go to the class, but just come back when the class lets out and look at their body language as they come out. And basically I was inviting them to observe whether or not this person had transformed in a way that they would like to transform. So if people were walking out with their shaking their heads and pulling their hair, maybe this wasn't the right place to go to class. And what you brought forth, Wil, is for those of us who are teaching and directing, and even for ourselves as individual actors, when we begin a rehearsal, when we begin a class, when we begin practicing by ourselves, can we identify and notice where are we now, and what transformation has occurred, and what will it take for me to transform? And something as simple as another very wonderful but intangible tool is crossing the threshold. So that is it's, you know, a decision that we make, an invisible thought that we say, okay, here is a threshold, and I cross this threshold into the artistic space, and what kind of magic happens. So anyone wanting to comment on this TPT or the threshold?
Okay. I will just say that when I first began doing the Chekhov work, my immediate impulse was, how can I put these principles into action? I'm not someone who sits down and studies stuff and then is able to activate it. So it was important for me to get it in my body and to get it in the bodies of the students. So I start every class with those principles. So the triplicity of hang, ready, and action that you have presented to us as well, that we start in a circle and we hang out, we come to readiness. And then I asked the class to come up with 3 things that we might baptize the space with today. So energy, joy, ease, create whatever is going on with them. And sometimes they're really goofy. And sometimes it's like, whoa, yeah. And so we take a great big breath and we pour that into the circle. And after we've done that, saying the words, doing the gesture, we cross the threshold. And sometimes I go, okay, now go back across the threshold the other way. And how is that different? Okay, now step in. And there's at the beginning of the semester, it's like, oh, I can't believe we're doing this. But after a couple of weeks, it becomes something that they look forward to. And this whole notion of being able to create your life, create your space, because many of my students will never be actors either, but these are tools that they will use for life. So there are a couple of ways that I use triplicity, and starting every class that way. And I think it's fantastic. I love what that does for all of us. So yes, it's great.
Great, thank you.
Lisa, I would like to start using the concept of TPT in teaching film acting whenever it is that I start teaching film acting again, and specifically in the idea that film is shot out of sequence, out of order. I mean, we have the luxury in theater of, you know, rehearsing and getting really close to the flow of the show and feeling, you know, instinctively where that transition is, but getting them to ask themselves, okay, so, you know, what Chekhov used to always ask Mala, you know, is your character thinking, feeling, or willing, right? And maybe asking the question, one of the questions, okay, so what kind of thinker are they at the beginning of the film, and how does that change? And where does that change? And how can we, looking at the shooting schedule, make sure that we really distill what that moment is and what that scene is, because we might be shooting that first. And so almost as though, just like we do the, you know, the winning gesture before an interview or whatnot, maybe going through that polarity and the triplicity, polarity and transformation physically several times, and then really deciding, okay, where is this on this scene or that scene, and being able to distill that, because otherwise, you know, it could be at the end of shooting and go, oh, this could have been way more powerful if there was more polarity between the beginning and the ending of the film.
That's great, Kristen, and thank you, and so glad you were able to join us, and you get to see Gail and Kristen.
Oh, hello, hi.
So Gail's not allowed to be involved in any way, shape, or form with your your interview. So just so you know, just you let us know, because but so great, Kristen, and this is what I'm about to share is applicable for stage and film, but it answers this need for film, which is when we create the characters graph with the characters' 9 events, and they may not happen in the story in the movie, but they may happen in between scenes, for example. So a character may need to create what happens between scene A and scene F, right? And because time has lapsed, the character has transformed, and we see them at a new stage. But if you utilize the win and loss, the 3 I's, with the win, loss, and the central gesture, and you create that gesture, you create the graph, then you can place every single scene from the movie on the graph, and then it doesn't matter what order the scenes are shot in, because you have created the scope and span that you're going to cover. And you do want to rehearse. The actor who has a significant role wants to rehearse their through line just as it is, almost like their own solo personal show, one person show. And again, looking at utilizing TPT to find the greatest arc. So on a film, of course, you don't know what your blocking is going to be. However, it's really important that the actor prepare, and again, using the triplicity, prepare a scene with sort of 3 different potential blockings, so that when you arrive at the set, then you run into 2 kinds of directors, one that says this is what we're doing, and the other which is this is the set, show me what you'd like to do. So what you prepare at home 3 different what I'd like to do's, and as soon as you get to the set, and hopefully you get there at least 15 minutes early, that's 3 times 5 before you're supposed to sign in, and can peek at your set, and start in your imagination adapting what you imagined at home, your adaptations for what looks like your set. And you use another intangible tool called making friends with, which it has very tangible results. You immediately go make friends with your set and come up with your favorite way that you might like to show the director if the director asks you how you want to do it. And you know already, because you've created your graph and you've rehearsed it all at home, you've found the greatest polarities. But then when you get to the set, there will be props and things you might not have expected. And so that's another use of props. The way that a person uses the props, it is the character in a highly expressive thinking moment and they're cutting something. That's going to be very different than if they're in the feeling force and they're cutting something. Or maybe you have a choice between making a salad and between peeling and preparing the lettuce for a salad or chopping the celery. And so, you know, if you're in the thinking force, maybe, and you have a choice, then chopping the celery might be a nice thing to do. But if you're in the feeling force at that time, then peeling the lettuce might be more, a more interesting activity to engage in. And if an argument unfolds while you're peeling that lettuce, then it becomes tearing, and there are ways to transform your physical activity along with all the other elements. If you have not given yourself the context, when you get to that set, it's all going to be about just trying to troubleshoot and scramble and figure out, and you'll never have the time to come up with the brilliant little nuances that become the sparkling jewelry there. Does that help? Great. Who else would like to comment?
I have something to say
Yes.
also about the last thing that you talked about on film. Just a thought. You can do a psychological gesture to each third of the script, and then you can work your way from this area. And I wanted to say another thing about transformation. The transformation can be looked at like something way bigger, because if we follow Chekhov and we do a lot more to be transformed, so it's starting to get I don't know how to say, you force something of a style, and you go out from the reality and the the daily acting, and you go to something a bit bigger and a bit more stylized. And it forced directors to think like this, and it forced writers to think like this, that these things can be done, and you can like weave, I don't know, like movements or styles that I don't know if aren't invented yet, but you can go to new things. So the transformation, the small transformation, if we will teach it to a lot of actors, and actors will give those choices to directors and creators and artists, so it can be bigger.
I love that. Absolutely. And Mr. Chekhov in this section discusses the concept that we are, that what we see so much of when people do not embrace the intangible potentials and utilize them, we see a kind of ordinariness. And it is, for me, what I experience, I say it's like, I go to see a show, a live play, or a film, and I may laugh or cry in the moment while watching it. But the next day, I can't remember it. So it was kind of like I thought that cotton candy was really yummy when I ate it, but it disappeared. And it's because everyone looked good. They were all the costumes were correct, and the blocking was correct, and the angles and the lighting and the lines were correct, and the emotions were correct. And they were on some level entertaining, but they lacked this deeper, this grander, richer sense of transformation that I think, Ophir, you're inviting us to be aware of. And I love the image of if the actor, and Mr. Chekhov really puts the task of the theater of the future into the actor's hands. If the actor trains to this higher level of artistry, then we can offer to our directors a better quality. And this is also why we're looking at, with NMCA, to train directors, certify directors, and certify actors, in addition to the teachers, and certify the designers, so that collaborating together can produce this greater whole. Because while Mr. Chekhov says, yes, it is our obligation to entertain, that's the body, you could say, that we work through. It's the genre of our job is to entertain. We can always, he does not see entertaining and higher, grander, more powerful work or art to be in conflict at all. And I really agree with that. I think we all agree that we can create powerful entertainment. I'm sure your spelling bee show is going to be very, very fun and entertaining, but I can already tell, and we can see from that board, that these richer nuances, this relation between, parent and child, and the peer group pressures and things like that manifest in this Putnam spelling bee, are all meaningful, really meaningful social issues. And I'm sure they're going to be brought forward. Anything, Will?
Yeah, I also think audiences have that desire to see something at a level that is lifted beyond the ordinary, because that's what we can see. We can see conflict and chaos and drama on the news, in reality. And I think they come to the theater, they come to have an artistic event that does lift it to another level. And it's interesting, one of the actors I'm working with now, and his character is doing community service, was in prison, and and he's playing it right at the moment. I'm trying to work with him, very real. And so it is actually deadening the comedy, and it's hard to even view it, because I don't think he has yet found that artistic beauty in the moment. He's just feeling like this is real, and I'm the tough guy, and I was in prison, and I'm gonna call you freaks. And that's something that I have to work on him with, of lifting it to a different level, so it has an artistic beauty to this character, even though, yes, that character has that past. So I think, he's seeking transformation, but a lot of our actors are taught from other areas to be very real, very natural. And then this Chekhov work sometimes stretches them beyond what they're comfortable with at first. But that's what our job is to get them there.
Yeah, yeah. Kristen, if I can ask you just to affirm one of the, you talked about what Will gave you.
Yeah.
Would you just talk about that for a moment?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we were exploring Harriet from A Man Who Came to Dinner, and Lisa and I were talking about, well, you know, it's a comedy, the show's a comedy, but what if we were to make Harriet murderous? And I love the idea, and I started to come up with all these wonderful ideas. And one of the ideas was having knives jutting out of my stomach and Will area in one of the scenes in that force. And it was
Don't see Kristen anymore.
Gosh,
She
Kristen.
must have dropped out for a moment. You know, I have to depart soon to work on another show that we're doing, our Broadway on Stage show. But I do want to say something that kind of alludes back to what you were talking about. How will our audience do something differently tomorrow from what they saw today? And we talked about that as the cast, and they came up with all these wonderful things. And again, that is empowering them, first of all, to be part of this collaborative process, not just me as the director saying, here's what we're doing, here's my concept, here's what I want from the story, you know, and actually you can guide them to get to where you want, which is kind of what we did. We had all these random things, and then, oh, well, what if we bring this together and add this, and what about this? And you can come up with that group concept, and I think it still serves you as the director. And it was really Mala, since I met her at a young age, years ago, which was great, who instilled in me that what you do should have a sense of social consciousness to it. And I've just never forgotten that what you put out there, you need to be responsible for and really think about how is this going to affect your audience, not just throwing anything up there. And that is something that has stuck with me forever, and I am just thankful for that gift from Mala.
Well, thank you, Will, so much. I really appreciate that. And I'm not sure if Kristen's back. Are you back?
I'm back. I'm back. Can you
Back.
see me?
Okay.
All right.
All right. So that was
Tell
that
us what Will gave you. Yeah.
yes, that was a little commercial break there. So we're back, and the knives are coming out of the stomach and Will force, and it's, you know, it's brutal. And I'm noticing, wow, this is more of maybe a Lady Mac, you know, than a Harriet. And I'm going, how can I make this funny? And Will, and as I was thinking that, Will goes, you know, Kristen, how about you put some light pink cotton candy at the on the tips of those knives? And I thought, okay, so I put the cotton candy on the tips of the knives, and all of a sudden it was hilarious. It was just hilarious. The whole style of my acting changed with that little difference in the image.
So, Will, I absolutely trust you'll find the right image for your actor.
For our convicts to become more cotton candy-like.
Yes.
Right, I'm going to sign off. Thank
Okay,
you all for tuning in.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Will.
Will. Thank you, Will.
Okay, so is there anyone else who'd like to make a comment in general about this, the tangible and intangibles, and how intangible concepts such as atmosphere, psychological gesture, and the analysis, thinking, feeling, willing, beauty, ease, entirety, and form, all of these are intangible means, and there are many more. Gail?
No, we were working on atmospheres in my acting 1 class today, and I present 4 that become the class's atmospheres. We do Texas, we do a New York City. That's my shorthand term for it. We do a safe space and a pleasure place. And they have those. And then I sent them off to come back with 9 that they observed or made up. And then they have a 3-line monologue they're working on. So they work with a partner, and the partner would call safe space, New York City, Texas, whatever. And they had to make an adjustment with their monologue. And I observed them as they were watching, and they were having the best time. And I don't always think of an acting class as a place to have fun. And we talked afterwards about it, and they said, oh, it was so much fun. It was so great to be silly. And I remembered how important it is to create an atmosphere that allows people to be playful and silly, to not make fun of the work, but to have fun. That was great. So the atmospheres were fantastic for that.
That's wonderful, really wonderful. It's, again, one of the things that we work on with with the National Michael Chekhov Association and the structure of the Chekhov Training Intensive, which has to do with consciously utilizing these intangibles to create tangible results. And that includes things like making friends with the space, and it includes the perfect ball drop, and it includes specifically placing certain strengthening moments throughout the intense program, coming together at the midpoint to come together into a safe place and debrief, and the angel walk, and other very carefully placed structures. So I'm mentioning this because the way you structure your programmings, your rehearsals and your classes and your whole syllabus, and even within your own life, you can apply this. If you keep in mind that intangible things, your alignment with your ability to concentrate, using the focal points in your life, to knowing when to focus on what in your life, the application of engaging your own thinking, feeling, willing forces, and how well balanced are you, and engaging in the feeling of ensemble. Are you seeing people in an antipathetic way? Are you looking at the world as if it's against you? Are you engaging the world as if it's in your favor? These are all intangible concepts that can make a very powerful change in how we're living, in how we're creating our art, and in everything that we're doing. So I hope that you have found this discussion on the intangibles and the many different elements useful. And I also challenge you to do what Mr. Chekhov suggests, which is to look at your chart and to just ask the chart, where is the hidden intangible in it? Some of it is obvious, that in truth, for example, and imagination, it's obvious that they are intangible, and yet they are extremely important and lead us to tangible results. But ask yourself for each element, how is it intangible, and how can that intangible element inspire a tangible impact for us? Any thoughts before we wrap it up?
I do. I have a thought. I teach TPT. That's almost like a first 10 minutes of class on the first day type of thing for me. And the reason is because, and this is what I love about this particular guiding principle, is we think about making the intangible tangible, and we think intangible, oh no. But tangible is really good. It's goal-oriented. It's something I can touch. It's something that I can create and I have power over as an artist. And so many acting classes that I've had that aren't Michael Chekhov felt rudderless to me. You know, I think Will was touching on it earlier, where we're trying to be real, and we're not really thinking about what is the goal. What are we trying to accomplish here? And I think TPT is like, okay, I can see the goal. I can see the polarity. This is where I have to go as a character in order to fulfill my, to fulfill the story of the play. And, you know, I do threshold exercises. Threshold exercise before every class myself, lowering the ring. And again, when we cross the threshold, it ritualizes the class and ritualizes the act of getting ready to work as artists for the next hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, however long I'm with you. And I really appreciate that. I mean, again, intangible is great, but tangible is even better because I can control it.
Cool. Very cool. And so if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is you are able to take what these intangible things are and bring them into a tangible functional application.
I have control as an artist, which
Yeah.
is, I think, what Michael Chekhov was trying to make me do is make me an artist, dude.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Jeff, before we before you close off, would you share just your bringing down the hoop and tell us about that?
Sure. So I kind of do it in an opposite way that most people do, and I call it the golden ring. And I've stolen a little bit from you, and I've stolen a little bit from other places. And basically, we start each class by looking to the center of the universe and seeing it and imagining it as a golden speck of light, and that it's hurtling towards us faster than the speed of imagination. And it's still connected. So it's a long like tube or string, and then it stops right above our heads. And coincidentally, it's the exact same diameter as our circle that we have made. And we're gonna help it down to the floor. So we all help it down to the floor, and then it drops through the floor and goes through the earth. And because the universe is the way the universe is, it's connected to the center of the universe. And then we step into it like we're stepping through a waterfall of light. And we're imagining ourselves stepping through into this light, which is love and creativity and wonderment and all the stuff that we really want to accomplish for that class. And we just bathe ourselves in it like we're bathing in a waterfall. And then we turn around and we stretch it to the borders of the space. And if we can't reach the borders of the space, we radiate it through our ideal artistic center. And then we begin our work. And it changes the atmosphere from, oh man, I can't believe what Susie told me to like, I feel different. And honestly, when I forget to do it, and sometimes I do because I'm in a rush or whatever, my students get mad at me. And we didn't lower the ring, Jeff. We didn't lower the ring. And that's why I failed today. So, so you want to talk about intangible to tangible. That, I mean, the first day, the kids look at me like I am crazy. And then by the time 2 or 3 weeks roll around, they can't live without it because it's real to them. And that's what acting is, making things that are not real, real. So I love it.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. I'm so happy that you shared that. And it speaks on a number of levels to the incredible creative individuality of each of the people who bring the work into their own worlds. And it's absolutely a beautiful approach and a perfect example of how to adapt and amalgamate and create an environment that is your own, that meets your group's needs. And one of the recurring themes about these intangibles that we have seen today, I believe, is that very often when you bring these intangibles into the classroom or into the rehearsal space, you get a lot of crossed eyes, a lot of scratching heads, and a lot of perhaps resistance. But if you trust it and stay with it, eventually it becomes such a deep part of the people. So for those of us who are teachers and directors, Mr. Chekhov is really inviting us to have the kind of courage and vulnerability to risk sharing some of these intangibles and finding cool and creative ways that are absolutely your own and assembled from various pieces into your own. So I want to thank you all very much for joining us today on our second guiding principle. And we will have a third, fourth, and fifth, and I will be announcing when those will be. So lots of beef to you, beauty, ease, entirety, and form. Thank you very much.
My favorite person is...
One minute on your imaginary bodies.
We took a scene from Golden Boy. We all did the same scene.